2014, with these payoff dates 2030, 2038, 2039. So as is, we're still paying off $727 million. They want to add another, with interest, $1.88 billion altogether. So again, if you're going to have questions, we're coming right up to that. Make sure you mark the page if we need to return to it, so we can look at that page ideally. One more look at this. The assessed value on which they base this large amount is shown over here in this first column. Again, $290 billion, all the county's taxable properties, over $1 trillion by 2059, when finally they pay off Measure G over here. So that's based on an assumption. And because it's a legal entity, the Contra Costa Community College District, they have to say this. They've assumed a 4% annual increase beginning 2028. Every year, the assessed value for the county as a whole goes up by 4%, compounded year by year. And so they have to say this. That 4% assumption is based upon 4CD, the Community College District's projections and estimates only, which are not binding upon them. So in other words, we escape all responsibility by saying that. And every bond measure that's passed by one of these local taxing entities always includes that language. They're required to. So were that AV growth to drop, in other words, if it didn't grow by 4%, guess what happens? They're still paying off the bond. And who pays the difference? If the assessed value drops, tax rates go up. It's no longer the $10 per 100,000. It's whatever they need at that point. All right. So what are they doing with money now? This is a summary of current conditions with the additions that would occur. They want new debt. We've talked about it. Here's a summary of the three previous measures. There were two Measure A's in there. 2002, 2006, 2014, 120, 286.5, 450 million. And here are the dates they pay off. So right now, the original three bond measures added up to nearly $857 billion in principal alone. And with interest, they're still paying off $727 million of that. If they get Measure G passed, they add another 920. So here's the quick summary. 920 million new debt principal only, 1.88 billion total repayment with interest for Measure G, 727 million existing debt for three previous bonds, 2.61 billion for new total indebtedness if we do all four bonds, 2059 final year of payment. Meanwhile, what's happening in the district? Well, their student base, their enrollment is dropping. When they began passing these bonds, and by the way, they tried in 1996 to pass a bond. I think it was 180 million or so. They cheated in 1996. They hired a campaign consultant and ran a campaign out of community college district offices. That's not legal. I had warned them by registered letter. Here's what I think you're doing. Please stop because it's illegal. I'd warned them with registered letter. They went right ahead. They spent somewhere that I could find and document over $40,000 running a campaign out of their district offices. I took them before a do-nothing DA. Gary Yancey was his name. He refused to prosecute this felony behavior. I took them before the civil grand jury. They refused to do anything with it. So I put it before the FPPC, and they fined the community college district in 1997, I think it was, fined them $16,000 on 8 counts of, guess what? Failing to file campaign finance reports for a campaign they couldn't legally run in the first place. So if they couldn't run it, they weren't about to file campaign finance reports to do it. So they got fined $2,000 on each of 8 counts. They paid off the fine from booster funds. That was 1996. The measure failed. They came back in 2000 with another bond attempt with a black eye now of embarrassment based on this finding of illegality, and they failed to pass that one. So 2002 they passed because of another problem. We'll come up to that in a moment, Prop 39. So remember that. But in the meantime, the number of students who attend is measured a couple ways. Total number of students who ever show up on one of these campuses for a single basket weaving course included. And some of them are pretty serious courses. Mark, I think, takes some course over there. You said, Mark?
No. Mike McGill takes the course.
Okay. But at any rate, so people who show up and take one course are counted among total students. But that's not the way the state counts students or funds these community college districts. They do it on the basis of full-time equivalent students. A full-time equivalent student, just in terms of the formula, is somebody taking 15 credit hours for 35 weeks of a full school year. That's 525 credit hours. So they count up the total credit hours taken by everybody, divide by 525, and that's the FTES full-time equivalent count for each community college district throughout the state. I think there's over 70 of them.
Yeah.
Community college districts throughout the state. So they actually publish a table. I pulled it down, and lo and behold, FTES actual count from 2025 reported to the state chancellor is 21,940, way down from the 30,000 plus when they started passing these bond measures in 2002. So that comparative table, here's what happened with all four bond measures, where they stood with FTES full-time equivalent students. And so what are they doing with that? Well, they have grandiose plans for expanding each campus, even though the student count is dropping. They want the campuses to expand. They want to have Taj Mahal buildings. And that's all to, I guess, attract more students back again. Well, unfortunately, a lot of school districts, K through 12, are doing the same thing. Their enrollments are dropping like a stone, but they still want to spend more money. San Ramon is planning to put on the November ballot a $750 million bond of its own. And it's not to build new buildings. They're probably on the point of having to consolidate and close some schools. So this is supposedly just for fix-ups of local campuses, $750 million plus interest for San Ramon. So back to 4CD in the community college district, grandiose plans. There's just one campus for one of their expectations. They continue to repeat these deferred maintenance kinds of tasks in every bond measure. You see the same stuff over and over. We've got to do roofing repairs, seismic retrofits, electrical rewiring, HVAC, over and over and over again. You wonder if ever anything works at these campuses. Over the last decade, this was of particular interest to me. If you run a commercial building, how much do you expect to spend keeping that building functional? And what you do is you look at your plant replacement value, and the normal expectation is 2 to 5% of that value is what you spend on capital maintenance, new expenditures. Well, the district patted itself on the back because it increased its expectation of percent of plant replacement value, how much they spend on maintenance. Well, over a 10-year period, they built it from 0.1% to 0.2%. In other words, 1/10 of what commercial buildings would want to do. And they're patting themselves on the back. Now, that's in addition to a $300,000 flat amount that they have for the entire district, but it's still not much money to spend on those needs, those maintenance needs. And the reason that they do that is this. Just like the county, they have huge salaries that grab a huge portion of their available general fund. And so money, again, once is diverted to enriching groups. The chancellor here, starting with a base salary of $404,000 plus, makes more than the statutory salary for the president of the United States. I don't think Trump is taking it. It's a volunteer thing to do, but the chancellor of the community college district has a base salary higher than the statutory presidential salary, much more than Governor Newsom's salary. 245, I think it was, 245 plus almost 246,000 for Governor Newsom. The chancellor, his base salary alone is 404, and with benefits, $548,000. And the people I've listed here, these are the highest in each category of those categories shown. So chancellor, vice chancellor, and look at the total number of all these administrators. Chancellors, vice chancellors, college presidents, counselors, $350,000 to be a counselor. Deans, associate vice directors, vice presidents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this long list of capacities, all of them very highly paid. And that's it. Those are measures B and G, and why I think everybody should vote no. So I'm glad to take questions at this point. Let me know here. Yes, sir, back here.
Measure showed that they had estimated an annual compounding rate of 4%.
In assessed value for all the taxable property and contra costa.
So for the next so many years.
33 more years.
Did they evaluate it relative to what the appreciation has been over the last, say,
They did, and they have seen most recently 3% plus, but they are assuming a 4% rate. And that may be somewhat realistic, but it depends on things beyond their control. If there's wartime, if there's a massive disaster, it's 33 more years of counting on that kind of high inflation rate of assessed value every year. And that's how they are able to say this tax is only going to be $10 more atop the existing $13.97, $13.97 is the existing one on each $100,000. We're going to add $10. The reason we can do that is we stretch it out over 33 years and assume a 4% AV growth.
not good?
No. Lisa.
So understanding taxes and all this stuff, very interested.
Speak up now. Yeah, high
Yeah.
volume.
Okay,
Mhm.
and so I'm new and I'd like clarification. So these are county-related tax measures that do not include our local school district tax measures. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mark has done, I almost put the slide in. I thought it'd be confusing if I did. But Mark actually had in one of his previous slides, the total that's collected in the county as a whole. Do I recall 15 billion
13.8 billion.
is the total in tax liability, including school districts and all the other special districts.
It's all
So-
types of revenue, including grants.
Yes, so he has a wonderful slide in that regard.
Yeah.
Remind me, I can send that to you too,
I
Lisa.
do want, and just so you know, as Moms for Liberty, we're all about the schools. I attend a lot of Lackawanna's board meetings, Lafayette, Moraga. You should vote no on any new school taxes because it's hurting your children. They're not getting the academics. They're getting all that other social agenda.
I agree fully with that. I'm a former teacher. Back in the 70s and 80s, I taught chemistry, math, and I coached swimming at a serious level. I had state champions in both my chemistry students and my swimmers. That was in Ohio. I came here and coached with Santa Clara Swim Club. I was going to be a teacher, but then I realized the stuff that I would have to obey and cotton to in local schools. I would have no part of it. So Lisa's perfectly correct. We pay huge amounts of money, starting salary in San Ramon schools these days for 186 a day contract year. 186. Joe and Susie Sixpack are working 240, 250 days a year. So as a teacher, I knew this. I had very high grades as a chemistry major, but I went into teaching by decision, not by default. $65,000, if you extrapolate that out to a full 240 day work year, they're looking at about $90,000 equivalent for starting teachers. So it's not as bad a profession dollar-wise as a lot of people suggest it
Can I
is.
answer?
So
So I just want to, I appreciate your point, Lisa. I just want to say, on behalf of the Taxpayers Association, that we look at each parcel tax on a case-by-case basis. We are opposing the ones in Lafayette and Moraga this time. We are not opposing the one in Walnut Creek. I know others have difference of opinion about that. And our focus will normally be on the fiscal aspects as opposed to the course content that you get at schools. Obviously, we are one place you go to get information about ballot measures. There are plenty of other places, but our focus is narrowly fiscal.
Can you distinguish how your position differed across those three different measures?
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you know this much better than I do. My recollection is that a problem with the Lafayette one is that there's a 3% inflation escalator that's regardless of the actual inflation rate. And we saw that as a really disappointing practice. The other thing is that the way the ballot language, I'm just going to say this. I think you could push back on this one. But the way the ballot language was initially written was very deceptive. It talked about extending it at $585 when it should have said increasing it to $585. So that also put a bad taste in
But
my
they
mouth.
were counseled by like-minded people to not write it
Yes.
like that. I have personal experience on that.
I appreciate you doing that.
I was a little bit surprised to see your position on that, given the fact that if we look at 40 years of inflation in the United States, it would be great if somebody could name me a year or multi-year period where there was not inflation.
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
During
Certainly well below 3%. Yeah. I mean, just why not just have it be cost of living? That would at least be more, more straightforward, right? I mean, at least I'll say they were better than Ocalanus, because Ocalanus, in their ballot language, didn't even admit that it was inflated. They just used the term adjustments, right? And as you say, we don't really get deflation in this country, right? So,
San Ramon School District tried to pass an inflation escalator parcel tax, and that was in 2024. They also tried at the same time to do a flat 98% or $98 addition to the existing parcel tax. They tried to do both. Both of those failed, and should have failed, because the reality of inflation was shown in the mid 70s, the late 70s, the early 80s. I started doing some investment property at that time, and I was paying 14% on a loan. So the true inflation can sometimes go much, much higher than the recent 2 or 3% that we've seen over many years. There are periods in our economy where it skyrockets upward, and that would enable this same district that says inflation escalator and gets an okay to do that. They can start doing the 14% addition too. Goes very high from there. So be very careful of inflation escalators, because that's the coming thing in these parcel taxes. Tom?
This gentleman had his hand up first.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
A gentleman, gee. That's the nicest compliment I've ever gotten here. I don't want to have to yell, so I'm going to come over here. How many of you were here in California before 1979? All right. Everyone else, take a good look at these people. All right. Sales tax measure. All right. When you put it on the ballot in the city or the county, if you specify what it's going to be spent for, you have to get a 2/3 majority to pass.
Thank you.
If you don't specify, you need 50%. What the hell were you all thinking? If anything, it should be the other way. So don't complain when you turn around and they say, oh, they are not allowed to say that we're going to use it only for this. That's why they have to say they will use it such as this. It's not because they're not trying to fool you. They're not trying to screw with you. They're forced by your laws. All right? Change the laws. Now, there are ways of doing it. There's ways of saying, hey, we go out and campaign and say, we're going to fix the roads. We're going to do the police. We're going to take care of old people. We're going to take care of starving kids. And then when the electeds don't do it, you vote them out. All right. Also, yes, I've been through that lately. All right. I know what it's like. All right. So the issue also is, don't tell me that what happened in the last century wasn't done. Government is screwed up for the last 250 years. All right. We have to go forward. Yeah. The question is, all right, do you agree with what I just said?
Of course.
Okay. So he agrees. So remember that. All right. As far as the legislature, you made a point about the legislature. The role of the legislature is to change the rules. If you don't like it, go to the court or throw them
I
out.
doubt there are many people here who disagree with you. And the
Oh, I
problem
think I
is,
can find a lot that will disagree just on the
well,
basis of.
the problem is getting a majority together who votes the way that makes sense. And that's a difficult thing to do in California, because you have you have essentially a state that's run by the unions. And that's true at the school district level. It's true at the state legislature level. And these are individual groups who are going to make sure that they pay themselves. There's something in economic theory. There was an economist named James Buchanan who specified something called the public choice theory. And it works very well in this instance to explain things. He said, if you have a very concentrated and determined minority, i.e. unions in the state of California, that once they coalesce into a united whole, they have far much more political power than a disorganized, widely spread, unfocused majority. And so the problem is the unions are able to concentrate large enough sums, in this case, $175,000 so far, to take this measure, because everybody involved has a chance of making a great deal more than they contribute to make that happen. Whereas the taxpayers who wind up paying it, well, they're busy with their kids, they're busy with their employment, they're busy with all kinds of things. and they are an unfocused majority. And again, as the colonists proved in 1775 through 1783, if you have a focused minority, in that case, about 1/6 of the people who lived in America successfully prosecuted the American Revolution. But today, revolutions are about different things. The revolution is to enrich a small minority of the people who run the show. So this gentleman is correct. Yeah, change it, but you've got a big hill to climb to make that happen.
My question was just,
Bill?
could I ask
Finding
Chirac a
honest
question?
people.
Is Chirac still here?
Yeah, it's right there.
Right here.
What percentage of your district is Republican?
I think 25, 24.
25. Well, just go to the legislature, change it. If you don't like them, just change it.
Right.
25%.
Well, so
But you have to earn it.
of interest, Chirac,
Earn it then.
San Ramon on Measure X, which is the forerunner template for Measure B. San Ramon voted no by 50.2%, I think was the number. It's on those colored sheets, but it's a number like that. They passed their own sales tax increase in 2024 that took them over the 9.25% ostensible limit. So this would take them higher. We're hoping that San Ramon and Danville and Alamo, among the groups that had the highest no votes before, will exceed those numbers this time. Just FYI, Measure X passed with 58.5% of the total county vote. 41.5% were no, 58.5% were yes. So we need to reverse that. We need to get slightly more people voting no. This gentleman's correct about the 50% number. As I mentioned earlier, John Joya himself in 2019 says, here's how we do Measure X on the ballot. We're going to make it a general tax. It'll be, therefore, 50% plus one to pass. That's all we need. So that's one benefit. But number two, if it's a general tax, we can spend it on whatever we want. So in answer to the unions that pushed it, said, there's the twofer for you guys. So go all out to pass Measure X. They did, and it did. And so that's what's happening again. We need to get the word out on the illegitimacy of how they're doing it, their willingness to walk right past the existing statutory limit. They're ready to say, you know, that 9.25% limit, it really doesn't mean what it says. We can walk right past black letter law and say, we're going to violate it, but we're going to declare that it meets the law. That's how they operate here in Sacramento. So anything else, folks?
Yes, Mike.
Tom.
So Prop 13 is on the ballot again in
Yes.
November. And it's hopefully going to pass, and we'll have to pass tax increases to property owners
Yes.
at 67%.
Yep.
These bond issues require not 67%, but only 50%.
I skipped right past, yes, not 50%. I skipped right past Prop
55.
39. So Prop 39 is a year 2000 measure that went on the ballot. The sponsors of it essentially lied. They said that we're going to enact a tough new 55% supermajority. Well, but it was already 67%. So the tough new 55% is far less, making it far easier to pass school bonds. And that was the propaganda, part of the ballot arguments that went in for Prop 39. So they snuck that past everybody. I think it passed with 52% of the vote. And a lot of people who voted yes didn't really understand what they were voting for because it's been misrepresented to them. The 2/3 majority wasn't just a Howard Jarvis invention. It's part of the, I think, 1879 original Constitution for California. And the reason it was done was to say property owners should not be the only people called upon for high taxes. And so the property owners of those days got together in the legislature and said, we're going to limit what a lot of these hangers-on want to pass for all of us, because there are a lot of people who don't contribute to the economy who would be glad to receive money from the economy, which we generate. And so 1879, there was an actual constitutional limit built in. So over time, that constitutional limit has been watered down to 55% in the case of school bonds. School bonds at 55% have a couple, they like to think of it as very tough hills to climb, but they're not. They have to, number one, they have to pass in one of the two every even year. So you can do it during a primary or you can do it during a general election. You can put one of those 55% school bonds on the ballot. Number two, and they emphasize this, they require tough accountability standards.
Yeah.
So they always have to have a citizen watchdog group. Well, I've seen those operate.
Me too.
The citizen watchdog groups consist of people who supported the bond in the first place because they get chosen for those groups by the taxing authority, in our case, the school board. They say, oh yeah, you support it, you support it, you support it. You're on the citizen watchdog committee is what happens. So that's every time. So fortunately, that was called out in part by Jason Bezos, and they removed a portion of that accountability claim. They really are not accountability. It's essentially accountability to these guys means collusive bargaining. So the people sitting on the two sides of the table are both employees of the agency. So the person from administration here says, okay, I'm the finance guy for our taxing agency. This fellow here says, well, okay, I'm one of the teacher union members. So let's get together and figure this out so we both benefit. It's called collusive bargaining. So that happens at every level of government, but especially so in California.
Can I
Go ahead.
So on behalf of the Taxpayer Association, so what Mike's talking about is citizen bond oversight committees. One of our former presidents, Jack Weir, was in charge of a statewide organization for these citizen bond oversight committees, and he was very enthusiastic about sitting on them. I think Cindy took over for Jack in Moraga.
Yeah.
I took over for Jack at 4CD. So I want to say two things about it. One is I agree with Mike from my own experience. The majority of people on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee are not that enthusiastic about providing oversight. I think they see themselves as being advocates on behalf of the district. So, one of the things that happened when I was on the 4CD CBOC is they put language in our annual letter saying, hey, we really think the district is spending this money well and you should support more bonds. And I'm like, wait a second, this is not the function of the Citizens Oversight Committee. We're simply here to render an opinion about whether the bond money is being spent well. And honestly, I have to say, I think they do a good job. But the reason I'm making this intervention is we are always short at CoCo Tax of people who are available to represent taxpayers on CBOCs. So if you are interested in being on a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, reach out to me and we'll see if we can plug you in somewhere, because you do learn interesting things about what's going on. I know in the case of Mount Diablo Unified, there's been a lot of problems with the misspending on an electrical contractor, and a couple of people on the CBOC have been and not even in this case, the taxpayer advocates have been very effective about shining a light on that problem, including getting an article into the East Bay Times. So I don't think CBOCs are a complete rubber stamp. I do think that there are problems with the incentive structures on them. And I think the way we can rectify that to the best of our ability is to engage with them and participate.
So I would say one point about the CBOX is a lot of the CBOX are appointed by the people who have special interest.
Well, Mark, let me just add that.
And I mean, this is Mike's show. I don't want to hijack. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to point out that there's no state law that says a representative from a taxpayer organization live within the district.
thank you.
That the school bond oversight committee supervises or oversees. So you can live wherever you want, but you can be nominated and appointed. There's no state law requiring you to live in any particular district.
Yep, for example, I'm in Moraga and I live in Concord. So you don't have some representatives.
Great.
Real fast. So I am the chair of the Measure X Fiscal Oversight Committee for the board, for the county. And the thing that drives me nuts in that is there's a separate committee that the Board of Supervisors appointed to determine how to spend the money. If you look at not whether the money was spent well, that's what my job is, how to spend it, the way the language is written on Measure X and how it's being proposed in this new one, you can drive a Mack truck through it because you can do it on anything. They're giving money to convicted criminals that come out of prison and they're giving them guaranteed income. Because, you know, there's no better way to get a guaranteed income than to rape, pillage, and murder, come out, and then the taxpayers give you money for life. What could possibly be wrong with that? Bottom line is, the language in Measure X, the language in the new bond, the new sales tax measure, is very, very loose. Now, what we do on the Measure X board is we look at whether the money that the taxpayers said they wanted to spend on, again, very broadly worded, and what the county board of supervisors voted to spend the money on, was in fact that money allocated and was it spent appropriately? And we unfortunately have to say, yes, do I agree that they're spending money on criminals, giving them free income? Heck no, but we don't get to make that decision. And that was, I think, intentionally done, because I think the majority of people in this room, and I think in the whole county, would go, I didn't vote for a sales tax increase because I wanted to give criminals a guaranteed income. So just keep that in mind as you think about voting on these things. Look at the wiggle language that they put in to determine whether that's something you want to vote for or against. And if it's overly broad, it's overly broad for a very good reason. They'll highlight, oh, it's for health, it's for, but they're gonna spend it, right? We're gonna help the fire districts. But what is really being spent on, the majority of it, is stuff that I suspect the majority of people would say, no, not on my watch. Anyway, thank you.
Sure.